unconscious biases and the unconscious, like,
Well, it's real shadow work to deconstruct this stuff, right? It's
yeah,
about learning to kind of like metacognition stuff, like learning to look at our internal reactions, learning to kind of pay attention without necessarily feeling shame, but with feeling, like the urges that I want to change these patterns in my behaviors. I want to change the conditioning, and it can be very hard. And I think, ultimately, racism functions in our culture, whiteness functions in our culture like narcissism as this kind of grandiose false self masking emptiness, right? I mean, it's like, when they talk about white people doing this or white people doing that, like that's not like a heritage. It's Irish people or German people. And so this
right,
idea
yeah.
of whiteness was literally
Yeah,
invented as a tool of hierarchy and a tool of oppression, and starting to deconstruct that can be really uncomfortable. But like you mentioned, there's the discomfort. It is like individual shadow work, right? It's also collective and cultural, but it's in our discomfort, that we find our growth. It's running towards the things that make us uncomfortable and trying to figure out why that is, and pushing through the discomfort to hopefully get to a place of more growth.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned something that actually reminded me of a question, or not a question, but a perspective of, you mentioned metacognition, and that you've probably seen that internet meme or people posting about, "Oh, this the highest form of intelligence is actually metacognition," being aware of your own thoughts, and mm, being having gone through trauma work and doing IFS and parts work, to me, that just reminds me of IFS, like, being aware of your parts, you know, and not being completely identified with a certain part, and it feels to me like so many of these, um, Trump supporters in this MAGA cult, they're just overtaken by a part. They've just been completely hijacked 100%.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I love IFS for that reason, that it's this idea of consciousness as one thing or the self as one thing isn't accurate. Consciousness is all things at once. And so
Yeah.
I think the recognition of these different parts kind of vying for the seat of consciousness is really helpful. But yeah, I mean, I to me, like Trumpism is driven by repressed shadow stuff that like it's very clear, I just saw something about Benny Johnson being gay, and it's not the gay part that's, obviously not the problem. It's the repressed part, right?
Right.
We have all of these people that are repressing elements of self because they hate those parts of themselves, and then they lash out and punish other people, um, for reflecting that part back to them, and that, so much of Trumpism is that there was like, you know this is kind of a gross metaphor, but Trumpism is like this wet fart, that they've been holding in, where like the social media and shared spaces of the modern technological world had made them feel like they can't be their authentic self, which is racist, right? And
Yep.
so they've been
That's right.
repressing that racist part of
Yeah.
themselves in shared spaces, and Trump gave them permission to be racist again,
Yeah.
openly. Not that it
Yeah.
ever went away, but it's about permission to kind of not feel shame and not feel guilt for their authentic
Right.
self, which unfortunately is racist, right?
Yeah, I
That
mean,
racism is baked into who these people are on a level of consciousness that transcends, conscious expressions of it, right? That it is a root of the way they see the world on an unconscious level.